Welcome back to the Family's Garage. We've got a really cool project here. This is the entire TANKS INC EFI kit for the 67 Chevelle. We got a beautiful big block Chevelle in Bordello red here we're working on. Putting the Holly Sniper 2 on, and I recommend these tanks every time. I really like them. So first, let's go over the tank. Like I said, this is the 67 Chevelle specific tank. What you're seeing is it's deeper than the factory tank, which gives you more capacity. It's beautifully powder coated. I mean, these tanks are gorgeous. Beautiful silver, because you're gonna see it hanging down below the car. It's got a nice rolled inlet. We have 1032 nut plates welded in for the cinder and the pump, and a built-in vent, in addition to the vent in the fuel pump, but we'll discuss that in a moment. The kit also comes with these brand new tank straps that are equally beautiful. These need to be used because they accommodate the extra capacity of the taller tank, so don't lose those. Before we go any further, let's talk about the directions. These are some of the best directions we've ever used. Not only do you get drawings, you get actual photos. How to set up the cinder. You also get how to do the vent. The vent is very important for two reasons. One, so you don't have pressure or vacuum stopping fuel flow. Number two, in case you put this thing on its lid, you got a rollover valve, which is required in some sanctioning bodies. What you're seeing here on the table is actually three different kits. We have the fuel tank, which is specific for the vehicle. We have the fuel cinder kit, which these are specific to whatever gauge you're running, whether it be 15 to 30 ohms for a Mopar or 0 to 90 ohms for a Chevrolet. Then we have the fuel pump kit. They have a GPA 2 and a GPA 4. We've used both with no issues. One is just smaller than the other. Sometimes the tank will be custom and will have a much larger intake. You choose your pump when you order the pump kit. We chose this one for up to 600 horsepower based on this built 454. They have them clear down to like 400 horsepower, I want to say, so make sure you select the right pump. The assembly is the same for everyone. In this particular case, the tank has a vent on top of the vent that's built into the fuel pump assembly, so they give you this Y fitting. This is the first time we've seen this, and it's clearly written in the directions of what to do with this. Obviously, being a 67 Chevelle, it has the built-in funnel, and obviously you get your fuel resistant cork gaskets and all your 1032 screws for both mounting holes there. One thing that bothers me about this whole setup that you don't get is the fittings that go into the fuel pump hat. Like, you can't use this without these. And I understand that maybe you're gonna run a nipple here versus an AN fitting, but you should at least give me a choice so I can buy this all together and I don't have to scrounge. We have ordered these from TANKS INC. They do have them. However, this company called Evil Energy off of Amazon has the same exact fittings for a third of the price. I think these are like $8 versus $35 at Summit Racing or TANKS INC. So you're gonna need these. If you order your Holly Sniper or whatever fuel injection system you're going with the full install kit, it usually comes with enough fuel line to fully plumb these cars if you use the factory feed line as your return off the regulator. So that's how we put them in. We've never had any issues. So let's get on with the buildup of this tank so you can see how to do that. So the first thing you're going to need is a tape measure of some sort or a ruler, some way to measure the depth of your tank. In this case, we are right at 6 1/4 inches. Ow. So what I do is I write that right here, because you're going to reference that mark not only when building the pump, but also building the cinder. So let's double check. Same here, so. I just like to check that. I'll write this out here also, 6.25 inches. That way when you're doing your math for cutting down all your tubes and cutting down your two assemblies to fit, you'll already know that depth. So the first thing we're going to do is trim the supply and return lines. They're clearly labeled. The supply is the heavy black line that your fuel pump's actually going to go into. The return is a little bit adjustable, but they're always too long. So I set the ruler here. We know we're at 6.25 tank depth, so I'm going to subtract 1 inch per the directions for the return line. So at 5 1/4, we're going to cut the return line off at a 45 degree. The feed line is a little bit different story because you have to put the pump in line, right? So take that off. We're going to press our sock on, and we know I have forgotten this insulator more than once, so now I put it on right away. Don't worry about the position of your sock at this point because it swivels and you're going to need it at a certain angle to drop into your baffle inside. You won't know until it's fully assembled where this needs to go. But we know that the tank, slide it out of my way. We know the tank is only 6 1/4 and we want this to sit near the bottom or on the bottom. So at 6 1/4 right there, I'm gonna mark that right there. PEX cutters work perfect for this. So like I said, we're gonna cut our return line 1 inch shorter than tank depth at a 45. And then we're going to cut our feed line at the depth to have our pump sitting right on the bottom. Just like that. When you're all said and done, it should look like this. All right, you'll have your connector wires going up through these. We have not tightened these two couplers yet. You'll have your pump clamp tight. You'll have your return clamp tight and your return zip tied to your pump housing, feeding your sock directly. At this point, I also like to throw the Evil Energy fuel fittings on because sometimes you get this installed and there's just no room. These are pipe thread, so make sure you use some kind of fuel resistant thread sealer on these. Now it's time to stuff it in the hole. Good luck. It's a really tight fit. And I just forgot the gasket. All right, let's try this again. Do it right this time. This is the orientation we're going for. You can see we're not going to interfere with our cinder coming off straight with a hose here or here. And you can look in here with a flashlight and make sure your sock is centered in your baffle. Make sure you got that done all correctly. And other than that, you're ready to lock this bad boy down. And that completes the install of the pump. You can see there's no torque spec given, but enough to crush the gasket a little bit and make sure each one of your 1032 screws has a little rubber O-ring on it there for no leaks. When we move on to the cinder, that's where you got to pay attention. You knew your tank depth, in this case is 6 1/4 inches. So you need to trim this bracket to 1/2 of the tank depth. So it gets a little tricky because they give you this intermediate piece and you're going to take that off. So here's what you're down to. You're down to the original top piece, and all I did was disconnect the rheostat wire off of here so I didn't damage it while I did this. You're discarding this center piece here. You don't need this. You're discarding these bolts. You're going to reuse the screws that went into the plastic housing when you set this depth. And this is only for tanks smaller than 6 inches, which we're barely there, so we're going to go ahead and do this. Step 1 is going to the center of your float here, which is this piece, to the top of the plate here should be 1/2 the tank depth. So we know we're at 6.25. So we need from here at the base of the hat to this rheostat point needs to be 1/2 of the tank depth plus 1/8. So we would go down to 3 1/8 and add 1/8 and put us at 3 1/4. Our pivot point, you can see, is right here at just about 3 1/4. which my math was correct. Half of a quarter is an eighth. So we're going to go down 3 1/4. That is half of our tank depth plus 1/8. So all we've done is wrap our wire back around and reattach it. And our depth is perfectly half the depth of our tank. The very next step will be setting your float height. You can see we removed this little pin that comes inside the rheostat and we've slid the rod in. So per the diagram right here, you can see they want that basically at the top of the tank. Here you can manipulate your fuel gauge. Like if you want the tank to read full sooner, or if you want the tank to show empty before it's actually empty, so you never are in danger of running out of gas, you can manipulate it, because obviously however far down this float goes is empty and however far up it goes is full, right? So remember that when you're doing your calculations here, you can kind of set this where you want it. We like it to be pretty accurate here, so we set, and again, that's your stop. That's what you need to keep in mind. When this is against the stop, that is full. So even though you can slide this out way out here and be even with where they want you to, you're never going to read full that way. So keep that in mind. This is full. So you need to slide it down right there to where you're even with the bottom of the tank. Now that will be no kidding full. Full against the stop here, empty. You can see how you end up with this tiny little assembly after you started with that big old assembly, but every time it's different. Every tank is different. So just keep that in mind, follow the directions. You can't go wrong. These are really, really good directions. Okay, so remember how I said that this doesn't matter. You can leave this as long as you want. Well, you can't, otherwise you'll never get it in the hole. I totally forgot about that. So they recommend you cut it off right here below the rheostat. We're going to use our trusty Milwaukee tool here and try not to catch this whole thing on fire. Okay, there you go. It's even cuter. It's a good idea to label the top of your housing here to know which way the float is pointing, because obviously if you stick it in and the float is in this front corner, it's not going to be able to go to full. So you want to make sure your float is back there free. It's not hitting the baffle. It can go up and down and give you an accurate reading, right? There you have it. That completes the full assembly of our TANKS INC tank, pump, and cinder. At this point, the next thing I'll do is I will build me a little ground harness so that these two grounds come off and go to the chassis together. Obviously, this is fuel pump power, and then obviously this is cinder here in the center that's isolated with the phenolic bushing. I just wanted to show you guys what you get, the process, because it's really simple. It's hard to look at online with the diagrams and stuff, but you can do this. Don't worry about it. And for the price, you're not going to come up with anything better for the price. But let me know if you got any questions in the comments about any further in-depth. I can tell you anything else you want to know about it. And thanks for watching. Subscribe if you like what you see on the channel, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Family's Garage.